In a culture of opposing opinions and challenging times, how do you get your head above water and get a breath of fresh air? You look for hope. You look for answers. And we shift from silos of segregation to social engagement in a quest for solutions. Stop talking about what the problem is and let's discuss how to fix it. Join us now as America Connects with your host, Rob Dalton.
Hello, America, and hello, all of you listening. Thank you for making us part of your day today. It's a real privilege to be in your world. I am Rob Dalton. This is America Connects, where we talk about solutions and answers and resolutions and information. We're not into the circle talk. We're not into the circling around the drain, like we're just getting ready to all disappear and all the negativity. We're here to talk about and teach you things you need to know. And today's topic is no different. First, I'd like to thank UBNGO for hosting and on the productions at the production end of all this in Burbank. So thank you, Tony and the crew. You can also find me at americaconnects.online. The website there, we've got both the audio podcast and the YouTube videos, americaconnects.online, or YouTube. You can look for my channel, America Connects. The topic today is a little near and dear to me, and I'll get into that. But we've got some great guests online. We've got 5 total, and I really think that you're going to get something out of the show. The title of the show today is Grief and Mourning During Social Distancing. It's not a secret that there is a death throughout our lives. There are family, friends, and coworkers, and the older you get, as an adage once told me, you can tell you're getting old when you go to fewer weddings and more funerals. So it just happens in life as we get old. But even more now, so with the pandemic, losing thousands of people daily, it hurts my heart to see the country going through the loss that we are right now. For whatever reasons it is, we are all in this together, the good and the bad. And there's been a lot of loss and lives. As many of our guests know, there are deaths in cancers and accidents and natural causes and tragedies. It's not just the coronavirus. It's everyday life. And the reason I'm doing this show is it's a bit personal for me. And just over a month ago, I lost my oldest son at the age of 30 to a tragic car accident. It came out of nowhere, and the grief and the mourning in our world as a family and his incredible circle of friends was just something I was not prepared for. I am not the only one going through it, but the tragedy and the quickness and the suddenness in which it happened was one thing, but the thing I learned is that being the age I am and having been to funerals, I'm an empathetic person. I feel other people's feelings sometimes more than others, and I've been able to be there emotionally and physically supportive of people when they need hugs and their hands held and give them comfort. And going through this the past several weeks, it really feels alone because we can't be there in the ways we used to be. We can't reach out and give hugs. We can't, even something simple like the visitation at the funeral home, you have to stay 6 feet apart. You have to give virtual hugs. You have to do virtual high fives. It hurt. It hurt a lot. And it was very different. And I'm not here to talk about the sadness. I'm here because, my guests are here to help you realize that grieving and mourning is different now with social distancing. And I want you to know that I know this, and we need to do a better job at helping each other. We really do. I know the entire country is grieving, and I'm not pretending to be alone, but I want to share it with you because we need to let you know that there are changes out there. No one's immune with the way this pandemic's going. It's not just the ones we lost, but we're losing our freedoms and we're losing our affections. And those are important parts of our world. Many of you have been to funerals and offered support in the physical comfort, but it's not there anymore. And we have to find other ways to support and comfort each other. And I don't have the answers, but I'm hoping that with the panel that we've got, we can come up with a few things that we can do. We need to be there in different ways, but I'm not sure how. Now, times have changed. And there is death of a loved one, if there's a death of a loved one in your future, and I pray that it's not in your future. But if there is, you might need to know what's changed and what we can do about it and what to expect and how we can help each other through this. And that's the show today. And it's not so much a downer as much as let's help each other out. Let's be there for each other. We've got some guests that will help us understand. So we'll try and bring it back up a little bit. So we've got Dr. Walter Simmons. He's an emergency physician in Arizona. We have our next guest will be Scott VanCamp. He's of the Austin Center for Grief and Loss in Austin. Scott, thank you. Welcome. We get Tony Adkins. He's a funeral director in North Texas. So Tony, thank you for making time in the show. And Channing Humphry. Channing has a special story to share as well. And he's seen some changes in the past year in his life. And I want to give him some time as well. So once again, welcome to America Connects. I am Rob Dalton. And let's talk about how this virus and everyday life is shifted because of our social distancing. So let me start with Dr. Walter Simmons, emergency physician in Arizona. Thank you for being part of the show today.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. Thanks for allowing me to be a part of the show. And by the way, let me just tell you how sad it was to hear that story about your son. And I hope that you're dealing with that okay, because that's pretty rough.
Thank you. I appreciate your thoughts. Thank you. It's been difficult. But there's closure every day. Every little things help. So introducing yourself, though, a medical director for Roosevelt General Hospital in New Mexico, emergency physician practicing 20 plus years, board certified in addiction and emergency medicine. You see the passing of loved ones and people in a much different vantage point than we do. What's it like for you and your staff seeing it every day?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It changed because, and maybe I'll give a little bit of my background,
yes,
at least in regards to COVID. So I was sitting at my desk one night and I heard about this very strange virus. And I used to spend a lot of time in virology and looking at infectious diseases.
Okay.
I used to do some teaching in infectious disease. And so I was listening to this very, astute expert talking about a virus that had shown up in China. Then it seemed to be spreading very quickly. It seemed to be a transmission from some animal to human, and then it was spreading very quickly, and people were getting pretty sick with it. At that time, I had a feeling that things were different. It just seemed that way because
it felt different. Yeah,
exactly. And the Chinese government generally is pretty good about sort of keeping things under wraps. When things sort of get out into the general media, they've generally lost control. And so I knew that there was probably something worse than it was sort of a SARS. It was very memorable when they lost control of the virus at that time. And so I told my wife the next morning, I said, I'm concerned that there's this virus that I heard about in China. And if it comes over to the United States, we would be just as susceptible as the Chinese population.
Sure. Yeah.
And next thing you know, it was here. I was actually working for a very large health plan at the time. And at the time that it struck into New York, I don't know if you remember this at the very beginning, then everybody sort of took time off work and they said, everybody go home from your offices. And we did that at my office. I thought now's a perfect time to go and volunteer in New York because they were looking for emergency physicians.
Sure.
And
yeah.
I had some time at that point. So I went to New York. I was there right at the height of both the COVID admissions and the COVID deaths.
The epicenter of it all. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I wasn't prepared at all. I didn't know anything about the virus. I didn't know how deadly the virus was at the time. I remember showing up into Coney Island Hospital, and they had a tent set up outside, and the emergency department had been sort of transformed into really sort of an intensive care unit, a unit where patients who could potentially get sick enough that needed to be intubated and into an intensive care unit could move, and then just sort of everybody else. And that first shift that I worked in the emergency department there, 6 people died on me. And I have never had a shift, and I've worked in some pretty busy emergency departments. And I've had traumatic deaths or, a group of folks in a car, maybe 2-car accident or something die, but never medical patients, never patients like this. And the difference, and you said it very nicely, and that is these patients are dying alone. No family members were allowed back. These patients are dying in a bed. The staff is gowned and gloved, and we were in, Tyvek suits and respirators. I mean, it was like ET, to a
Yeah.
patient.
Yeah.
And here they are dying, and you can't even touch someone. You can't hug someone. So it was devastating. I called my wife that evening after my first shift, and I said, I've just never seen anything like this. And, I'm going to need therapy just to get over, what I saw tonight. And that's been repeated over and over again. So from my time in New York to then coming back to Arizona and working in the Southwest in the emergency departments, we were lucky for a while. We didn't see the virus like they did in New York. We didn't see the level of death, and it's now as bad as it ever was when I was in New York. We have a lot of COVID patients, a lot of really sick elderly COVID patients that don't make it. So it's sad, and I could tell you some experiences with patients, but I don't want to take all the time from the other guests. But it's been unusual. I can tell you that patients, I feel sorry for them, but I feel very sorry for their families. Their families are getting very frustrated because they can't come back into the emergency department and see a 98-year-old grandfather. In fact, I almost got asked for I almost was asked to have a fight outside my emergency department because I told the son or the grandson of one of my patients he just couldn't come back because we had so many sick patients and we just couldn't do it. And he literally asked me to step outside and fight him.
People get emotional.
It was, yeah. And, and I could understand his frustration, but I got an emergency department to take care of, and I'm not into fighting people. But that's the level of frustration that the patients and their families are going through. I've seen patients literally die with their cell phones in their hand, right after they talk to a family member. We end up intubating them, and that's the last time they'll see their family member or talk to them again. So it's traumatic, I think, for the staff. It's been traumatic for me. It's a part of the emergency department that I don't know if I signed up for. I mean, I was in Iraq, I've been in combat, I've done all of that, but this is just a different world.
I think it is. And this is why we brought you on for an inside view of things. Is it often the case, or is it fact or fiction, that usually if someone goes into the hospital for COVID, they may never see their family again aside from phone calls? Yeah. And it's got to be not only hard on the patient, it's got to be hard on the families.
Oh, devastating to them.
It's got to be. I can't even imagine.
What is it like when you tell a family member? I mean, generally they can't even wait inside the hospital because the exposures are so high. So you're generally asking them to wait in their car. So they're literally one step more removed. They're not even in the waiting area. We have to call them, or they have to call us. And so they're not even on the, inside the hospital. They're in their car. It is different than I ever have seen medicine practiced in the past. I mean, we're doing this to protect the patients. We're doing this to protect the family members. We're doing it to protect the community. But at the same time, it's devastating to my nursing staff. It's devastating to the physicians. It's difficult on all of us. And I know it's devastating to the families.
Well, I wanted to bring this up too. And one of the reasons I was happy to have you on the show is because everyone sees things from their point of view. It's just the way we're built. How does it, what about me? How does it affect me? And I feel terrible. I've yet to have an experience with COVID. I'll be upfront about that. But it's got to be difficult on the families, but I want the families to know that this is the hospital staff members are having a difficult time too. And they have to deal with everybody who's dealing with this. It's not just that one family. It's, I'll just say 14 families at the same time. It's got to be tough for your staff.
Oh, it's horrible. And it's compounded because it's not just a COVID patient, it's a heart attack patient, it's a stroke patient, it's a traumatized patient, it's your kid that tried to commit suicide patient, and all the family members who would love to be with their family, and we would love to have them there, and like it was 9 months ago. It's a different conversation. And again, some family members, and I would say most family members, are understanding, but there are the family members who, and it's just out of grief and it's out of frustration that are questioning why we have to do this
Sure.
and don't want to follow the rules. And it makes it really difficult for the staff. I literally had one patient that laid on the ground in front of our bathroom and refused to get up because we asked him to step out. So
Grief can have us do strange things.
Oh,
man.
for sure. Yeah. I mean, and we all understand that.
We do, but it's in the moment, it's really hard.
Really difficult. Yeah. Because we're as busy as we've ever been in the emergency department. We're seeing, a third or sometimes double the volume that we would normally see. And so the staff with the same number of staff, sicker patients. And so it's a lot of strain on that group.
And you just don't have that extra time to give to people because you've got to get back to work.
Right.
That's the part too. So,
oh, for sure.
Dr. Walter Simmons, thank you. Don't
You're
go
welcome.
too far if you can. I'd like to bring you back around. I want to introduce Mr. Scott VanCamp. He's with the Austin Center for Grief and Loss in Austin. Scott, welcome. Nice to have you with us. Really.
Thank you, Rob. And Walter or Dr. Simmons, thank you very much for your sharing and your insight and your remarkable compassion for your patients. And Rob, I'm very sorry for your loss. It's so recent.
It's very recent, but I'm doing this because I learned a lot, and I want people to be prepared, and it's important. You have to know what's coming. You got to know your enemy, so to speak. So, a quick intro here. The Austin Center for Grief and Loss, the Austin Grief, helps individuals and families who have experienced a loss to the death of a loved one from either illness, miscarriage, accident, suicide, or violence. They've expanded care into mental health services for stress and anxiety now during this pandemic. So. The question is, grief and mourning has changed with the pandemic. What have you seen, and how are you helping your community?
Yeah, some of the things, to kind of go back to, we were talking about some of the losses and some of the types of death. And, and Dr. Simmons, I'm sure, could speak to this also, that, we've seen more ODs from substance issues. We've seen an influx of suicides that's increased exponentially also. And, another thing that Dr. Simmons said that I thought was particularly pertinent was, he mentioned at one point experiencing something that caused him to need therapy, and just how much of a role vicarious trauma is playing in impacting like our frontline people, and the fact that it's cumulative. So all of these losses, and it's also compounded by, other types of losses, like, the loss of our physical safety, the loss of financial security, the loss of overall loss of normalcy,
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
right. What in dealing with it as you do, as a grief counselor, what can we do to help those who need our help with their loss? I'm at a loss on what to do, and that's why I wanted to have someone like yourself on.
Yeah, I think there's several recommendations, and the first one I think is to recognize that grief is nonlinear. One of Kubler-Ross's great regrets was that people saw her DABDA model as linear, and it's just not that way. It's very individual, the process of grieving. I think I've experienced depression, and anger and bargaining and, denial and acceptance all in one day, maybe all in 1 hour. My most recent loss was my mom. And so just, people to know what to expect in that. People to engage practices like mindfulness that help us stay out of fight or flight responses.
Okay.
Again, recognizing the role that trauma is playing, in this season of our lives. In the season of the holidays, being able to set, clear boundaries with people.
Yeah.
Techniques such as using, I feel statements to navigate these relationships.
Statements. Is that right? I heard I feel statements.
Yeah. It sounds so simple, and it's very, very intimate. And that's, I did a grief group today, and, we talked about someone that had received a text after their loss from a probably very well-intentioned friend. And the text really hurt. And, withdrawal and isolation are symptoms of grief.
Okay.
you know, as well as depression and anxiety. And, you know, this person was experiencing that, and they cut this person off. And we explored the idea of saying, you know, I felt disappointed that, you know, you texted me rather than either calling me and I know this is difficult in the context of what we're talking about with social distancing and so on, you know, to actually reach out to that person. And, you know, we look at attachment in terms of trust. And, you know, attachment is defined as rupture and repair. So even if that person is taken aback by us actually sharing and recognizing our emotions,
Okay.
you know, then we have the opportunity to build that intimacy and trust through the repair that facilitates. You know, Rob, talking about things to do, like practicing gratitude purposefully, you know,
Purposeful
gratitude being,
okay. Yep.
you know, closely correlated with, you know, positive emotions that we may experience, and, you know, a reduction in those trauma responses or cortisol responses that people have. You know, I could kind of go on and on these recommendations.
Sure you can.
You know, setting aside time to grieve, talking to other people and telling your story, you know. You know, a huge one is, and this has to do also with, you know, getting into the parasympathetic and out of the sympathetic nervous system and those fight or flight responses, and being able to be mindful enough to recognize ambivalence, the idea that, you know, I would imagine, Rob, as you're, you know, in this journey of recovery in the grief of your son, that, you know, there's moments, I mean, I just heard you kind of, you know, laugh in acknowledgement and social connection, where there's feelings of relative joy and feelings of, you know, like I said, connection, intimacy, hope, and being able to honor those feelings along, you know, with our, you know, feelings of shock and disbelief, fear, anger, depression, hopelessness, sadness, longing, guilt and shame, abandonment, you know. And also maybe the last thing to sneak in there is,
go ahead.
You know, also knowing when, like, the duration or the severity has become such that it really is important to reach out. We've seen a lot of people using psychotropic medications prescribed by doctors for the first time in this season. Yep. And again, I think it's that compounding of traumas that people are experiencing, also in the context of their grief and loss.
I think you're right. And with again social distancing, it's something people turn to. Scott, I appreciate your insight. Thank you. Don't go too far.
Thank you for having me.
The next guest is one I wanted to have on the show, and I'm grateful that he is. Tony Adkins, a funeral director here in North Texas. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's your bio. I'll let you do yourself, but give us a little bit of background of why I wanted you on the show today.
Well, I've been doing this all my life. I was born in the funeral business. Had a father. We still have a family business in Natchez, Mississippi, and moved out here to North Texas to be with our children. I'm with the Fine Family Funeral Home here in North Texas, Turtime Jackson Mar Funeral Home. I've never seen anything like this as far as the pandemic and what we're going through and the distancing. And, you know, even when I was with you, Rob, for visitation, it was sometimes I had to be the bad guy and tell everybody you got to do distance.
Right.
And that was really hard for me to do because I'm not used to that. I'm used to hugging people, shaking people's hands, that human touch that we can't give anymore, and wearing masks. It's just really different. And of course, we are doing some things in our chapel where we can do half the capacity of our chapel.
A finite number of people can attend services these days.
Right.
And that's something people have to do.
And each funeral homes throughout the country are doing different things. I've talked to a funeral director the other day that said they're only allowing 25 people for a service. Some are not allowing any services at all. So to me, that hurts us more than you'll ever know, because we don't have that human touch and hugs and telling us, how sorry we are and being there to help people. Especially for us, we can only do what we can for people at that time, and it's really hard.
It is, but you're doing what you can because you offer streaming. Many funeral homes are doing streaming. There's the funeral services for those that can't be there. Right.
We are doing live streaming. We are doing a lot of graveside services. We are distancing ourselves out there where we have speakers set up at the graveside so that people can stay in their cars, or we have a FM channel that we can use so people, if they're afraid to come into the funeral home, they can listen on an FM channel, or they can watch the live stream on their cell phone or iPad. So we are trying to do things that we can try to help. So
you're having to get really creative.
It has been really creative, some of the things we've done. It's
you're finding a lot of success in reaching out to other funeral directors?
Yes. We touch out every time we do something. We're always talking about, what are you doing? What can we do better? And we have a meeting in our funeral home once a week that what's working for this director, or what can we do better? And most of your funeral directors across the country are doing the same thing. They want to, that's their heart. They want to do what they can for families, and it's really hard. It's just different.
And it's even different from when I'll say April and May when this first started. It's even more different now. And even though it's only been 6 months, there's been a significant amount of change that you've witnessed and had to put in place.
It's a change every day.
Okay.
It really is. And every time we have a call list in the morning time where it tells us how many COVID patients that have passed away during the night. And my wife's a nurse, and she said, "How many did you get?" And may not get any, but we may get 5.
Right.
And it's just it's really heart wrenching to have help those families, and some can't even come in the funeral home because they've been quarantined, with their families and so forth. So we had to do everything virtual, so that makes it even harder.
Yeah. Wow.
And,
I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
And I'd like to stick around and bring you back again. I'm going to invite to the camera our next guest, Channing Humphry. Channing is a gentleman who has grieved 5 relatives having passed in the past year. And I found your story interesting. Hello, Channing. Thanks for being on the show.
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Channing was born in Akron, Ohio, but ended up growing up in Arlington, Texas. He's the father of 2 boys, now engaged, and the owner of a semi-pro live sport media company. His father was murdered in an office shooting back in 1990, but recently, as I said, endured the loss of 5 relatives over the past year. So I found that interesting, and I'm glad you're here, Channing, because in the past year, there have been a lot of changes for all of us. And on this particular topic, you've seen the changes over the course of the year. What do you have to share?
It's been a clear difference. My family, I'm one of the younger members of the family. So a lot of the people in my family are older. So I was accustomed to as much death as a normal person. You'd have an older relative pass, but
sure.
These last ones kind of compounded all in the same area because I had 2 of my older uncles. They passed not of anything COVID related. Then my oldest cousin, she had a stroke. She had a stroke a year ago, which left her in hospice with her mother in the Houston area. And my uncle was actually helping take care of her. And my cousin died, and then my uncle, who was taking care of her, he all of a sudden got sick. He had liver cancer. He passed away from that. And then my uncle actually died 2 weeks later after. So it was within a month, 3 of them, but all 5 within a year.
Wow. Now, what have you seen in how the family is responding with the lack of social distancing?
Yes. And one of the main reasons it sticks out with my family, we're spread out. So my grandfather was in California.
Okay.
The family was down in Houston, and then a large portion of my family lives either in Ohio or on the East Coast. So we were used to always having to fly out for family events. So everything was different. The travel, having to go through the airport to get to the funeral, the fact that the funeral was a grave site funeral,
Okay.
Just the communication about it. Because my mother actually lives in Bedford as well. So she's down the street. My brother's in Louisville, so that's not too far. So, you know, during times of loss, we usually would all meet up, or we'd all go over to my mother's house. And with my mother being, you know, in her 60s, that's something that we don't even do. So it's just, you know, more of a phone call, or I'll see a post on social media, and it kind of gives it a surreal feeling because you don't go through the usual grief, even the funeral, with the funeral being a gravesite funeral in both cases. So we weren't inside. There was no walking down to the casket or being able to hug your loved ones as they come in, or I mean, you have to think about in the usual funeral, the amount of touching. You know, the wife of the person or the spouse would stand by the casket and may touch every single person as they come in. None of that occurs anymore. So
the lack of physical comfort, it's huge.
Yes, it is huge. And then, you know, my grandmother, it was her husband. So I remember flying into California, and then when I get there, we're wearing masks the whole time. So, because she's old as well, so I don't want to spread it. I come in, I can't give her a hug. It's like we're
super careful.
Luckily, she has a large house, so we didn't stay there. But you know, it was never a point where it was like we were really there, because we couldn't have any physical contact. So
you've seen it yourself, and you've seen it more from a year ago to these days, and it's difficult for your entire family, and has been. I'm sorry for your loss. It's been a traumatic year for you. I hope it slows down for you.
It has been, and I mean, it's coming to an end. Some of the loss were expected just because of the age of my family, but you know, my cousin and just all of them happening back to back really made it traumatic. And then, you know, just the news. You know, you turn on the news, and you know, outside of what was going on in politics, just you're seeing the COVID cases, you're seeing the deaths, and then having it happen in your real life makes it real. Right.
Thank you, Channing. I appreciate your vulnerability and letting us in a little bit. Dr. Walter Simmons, you started the show, and I wanted to bring you back around. I know you deal with this, and we talked about how even Channing's family has lost people from, I'll say, natural occurrences unrelated to the pandemic. But what do you have to add as we kind of wind up the show here?
Well, look, I appreciate the comments from all the guests. You know, it's amazing because even though, you know, I work in the emergency department, we're all sort of, and I work with my nursing staff, but it feels like we're all sort of a part of the same team. Channing, my heart goes out to you. Geez, that is a lot of loss to tolerate in 1 year. And I'm so sorry for all of what you've gone through. And to think that it didn't sound like almost any of it was COVID related. So, you know, just devastating. But like I said, I feel like the group here, we could all sit down and probably have a soft drink together and commiserate or something harder than that. And, you know, and when you were talking about all the addiction, again, the other side of my coin is to take care of addiction patients. And like you were saying, just the amount of addiction, even amongst healthcare workers. I can't tell you a shift that I can think of recently where one of the nursing staff or a physician that, you know, that I know of didn't say, I'm going to go and just, you know, have a few drinks. People that I don't think generally, you know, would go out and have a drink, and you know, just going home and having, you know, an extra drink every night just to, you know, deal with all the craziness that we're all, you know, part of right now. So I feel like the whole group here is kind of on the same team, and I appreciate everybody on this call. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Walter. I appreciate it. It's nice having your not just your expertise, but your practiced in compassion. And it can't be easy this time of this right now in these times. And
for any of us,
I wish you and your staff luck as you continue on, especially through the holidays and finding a new normal. Really.
Thank you.
Scott, I wanted to open up and thank you for any closing comments, and thanks for being on the show again.
Yeah, again, to piggyback with Dr. Simmons, I think, one of the impacts of the pandemic is that, any mental wellness or mental health issues are really exacerbated in this time of loss of normalcy. And, we mentioned the difficult or complicated relationship with substances that people experience. And, the same thing with, complicated relationships with food and, addiction to pornography. And of course, that really impacts intimacy in families. And it's a lot of trauma on our communities right now. And I love what y'all said about, ways that we can really come together and work together as a community. And, at the center, we've been trying to do a lot of outreach to connect with, social justice organizations and medical organizations, and just really focus on this sense of community in this time.
Good for you. And I hope you see the results of that too, because it's important. We are all, it was a slogan that started early and it's still valid. We're all in this together. Yeah. We all have a role to play. We all have a role to play. And while I'm thinking about it, are you noticing not so much of a subject, a rise in addiction to coping, staying at home in this isolation time?
Rise in addiction. I'm sorry.
Are you seeing an increase in Dr. Simmons for you either? Are you seeing yes. a rise in addiction with everyone staying at home and isolating?
So I can tell you that we, as a health profession, I thought that we were at least getting a handle on opioid addiction.
Okay.
But during this pandemic, we've lost control. And I'm sure Scott's seen this as well in his work. I've seen just a tremendous surge in both opioid addiction, methamphetamine addiction, alcohol addiction. And I can tell you the normal story, especially for the alcohol addicted patients, is they sent me home, I was bored, and I started drinking.
Yeah.
The opioid patients, they sent me home. I started using opioids again.
Yeah.
And that is a common theme. And when I say it's common, 3 or 4 patients a day tell me the same story, that they had gotten a hold of their addiction, they were doing well, they were working their program, and then they were sent home. And the boredom led to bad behaviors and just all the other stressors that Scott was identifying in his conversation, hit. And so the addiction issues that we're going to be dealing with for the next several years again, coming out of this pandemic will be
lingering,
will be amazing. Yeah, it's very sad.
Yeah,
Scott, I know you're getting ready to go. I know you've got a hard out here pretty soon, but any closing comments on that?
Yeah, just as we come together as a community and recognizing all of the specialties, and really focusing on something that you had highlighted related to Dr. Simmons, and that's having a sense of like humility and compassion, and looking at the complexities and the unique nature of like the impact on mental health. I mean, one byproduct of a pandemic, and none of us were prepared for a pandemic, is a mental health crisis and an addiction crisis, And like Dr. Simmons said, those things are going to last for many years to come. And those things do become legacies in families of origin and, can be passed on. So we really want to be proactive, and we really want to be honest and communicative about what recovery looks like.
And we can do it better together.
Yeah, 100%.
We really can. Thank you. I appreciate it, Scott, really. Tony, Turrentine Jackson Morrow Funeral Home in Collin County. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to tell you that one of the things that surprised me with everything I went through, that one of the things, Tony, that sticks out from my, you mentioned the visitation, the thing that I still can't get used to, the memories of people coming at me being 6 feet away with a mask on. There are so many people, I had no idea who they were.
I was in the funeral the other day, and I had my mask off, and she said, I need to speak to Tony. And I said, well, I'm right here. And I didn't have my mask on. And she said, you're not Tony. And I said, well, I had my mask on then, so you didn't recognize me. So
True.
But
Yeah.
it's really different having a mask on, and it's really just a tough time.
It is. And you guys did a great job. I want to wholeheartedly and publicly thank you for your compassion and the service and doing the best you could as what we had to work with. But really, thank you, Tony. And I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing what you struggle with. Thank you.
Well, I really thanked all the other guests here. I learned a lot from them as well.
Good.
It's been, I really enjoyed it. Thank y'all for having me.
Good. Channing, thank you for making time. Good luck with the live sport media company. Channing, I hope things continue to improve for you, and I wish you luck in finding your new normal as well. So,
yes, man, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you inviting me to be on a panel with doctors. And before I go, I want to remind everybody, just because I'm up in the booth, but I'm at sports events, please wear your mask above your nose. It's almost pointless if it's like this.
You're right. Everybody, thank you. From Dr. Simmons. Let's see, I want to do the right thing here. I had a couple notes. Dr. Simmons talked about, you deal with the families left behind, and we appreciate your compassion there. And you brought up the fact that your staff has a lot to deal with, and it's got to be hard with your staff as well. Scott, grief is nonlinear, and practice I feel statements. I like that. I like that as well. And Tony as well, and Channing, thank you for being part of the show. Everybody, thank you. It was nice having you. We appreciate it. I appreciate your time invested. Those listening at home, thank you for letting us into your lives for just a day. We're always grateful to have you accept us in your lives. We hope you learned something. And if you've been through this already and you've gone through the grief and mourning during social distancing, we're sorry for your loss, and we hope you got through it okay. And don't hesitate to reach out to those, even if you're still having difficulty. Asking for help isn't a weakness. It really isn't. Fall back on people who love you and let them know you need a little help. It's okay. Myself, thank you for listening to my story. I dedicate this show to my son. I miss him. He's my oldest. It's going to be okay through time. And I miss him and I love him. But for you, thank you everyone for being on the show. Thank you for honoring my son, Bobby Dalton, in this time. But more importantly, helping people with what's coming. I think that's important. People, there's the good times are not around the corner yet. So you need to know what's coming so you can be better prepared. And I hope this show at some level has done that. And with the help of our guests and your ardent listening, you're better prepared. It wasn't about sadness. It's about being ready for what we hope isn't coming. But at some point we know it is. We'd like to thank Tony and the UBNGO team. Again, I'd like to thank my sponsor, Globe Runner, based in Dallas, but they are a great social media company, website building and SEO engineers. We rocket fuel for your business at globerunner.com. Yes. And on behalf of myself and my crew, thank you. Thank you for being here. And let's keep sharing smiles. They're contagious. I'm Rob Dalton. Remember, America, stay connected. Thank you.